All right, welcome back to another tutorial for Play Action Football. This is a new tabletop cards and dice football game from the Clark and Addison Gaming Company. In this video, we're going to go over a little bit more in depth understanding the team cards. Now, the team cards are at the heart of the game. You can't play a game without the team cards. And you'll get 32 team cards for the 2023 season. However many teams there were in the NFL or during that season. So 1985 only has 28, right? So you'll get the number of team cards for one for each team. And let's just walk through all the different areas here. You can see there's several different areas on the team cards themselves. So you're going to have the team with their primary team color in the background. So it'll be a little bit easy to kind of see what each team looks like. Here's a Minnesota team card. You'll see that it comes like this, and it's not quite the width of a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So you can cut that off or you can leave it be. For practicing and things like that, I didn't really cut it off, but for presentation, you can see, and especially if you're playing on like this, where you have a video, maybe you're videotaping it or something like that. Videotaping, how old am I? You're just recording it, and it gives you a little bit more space out here, to put something next to it, to be on camera, or a little bit more this way. So just a little something to think about if you are going to be recording anything with these team cards. I also like to put one under the other, because typically you're only going to need to look at one at a time, although you might want to see these and just kind of have them staggered a little bit so you could see each offense and defense. If you're using the included score sheet, you can simply transfer these numbers here to the offense and defense, and then basically you're playing with these other parts here. You can see how the team did during that season, which division they're in. We have their base defense. The base defense comes into play on almost every single play. So if we have our, this is for the solo game. So you have your offensive play calling charts and defensive play calling charts. You can see here on the defense, when it says base or base blitz, it's referencing this base defense. So if we were to roll a 1 on first down here, we would be looking at this column here. If we rolled a 3, we would be looking at the blitz column for the 4-3 defense, because that's the defense that Kansas City runs. So the base defense is important. You'll be looking at it every single play, so you'll definitely get to know all of the base defenses of the teams that you're playing. We have an offensive number. This is how good was the team on offense. Most mid-level teams, just sort of the middle, maybe the middle 80%, I would think 75% of the teams are going to have a 1 on offense. So that means for every roll, every 2d10 roll. So let's say we rolled this and we get a 10. You can see a 6 and a 4. You just basically add those together. So instead of a 10 and 3 yards, we get an 11 with a d6 plus 1. And so instead of 3 yards, we wind up with 7 yards. So 6 plus 1 is 7. So you can see that it gives you a better opportunity. If it was a 9, it would go to a 10, and you would get 3 yards instead of 2. And we all know that in sports, when you're playing with a field and moving the ball in a field, 1 yard, 1 inch, half a yard, those things can make a lot of difference in a game. So that's how your advantages will work. And so they have a little bit of an offensive advantage. The bottom maybe 10 or 15% of the teams are going to have a 0. The top 10 or 15% of the teams are going to have a 2. And that's for the offensive number. For the defense, your top teams are -2. Your mid-level teams are going to be a -1, and then your bottom feeder defenses are going to be a 0. So your 0 level teams have no advantage and no way to counter any sort of offensive advantage. So if you think about it that way, Your mid-level teams, most of them are going to be like a 1-1 in that sort of combination. And if you have a 1-1 playing a 1-1, then it comes out to no advantage, right? So for most of the teams that you play, unless you're playing a great team like Kansas City, or you're playing a really poor team that maybe has a 0 and a 0, that's a really poor team. That means they're at the bottom of the league in both offense and defense. So unless you're playing one of those teams, you're probably going to have very little, if any, advantage. Maybe it can work out where there's an advantage with the weather, or an advantage on the play call between the offensive and defensive plays, or maybe even an advantage with if you're playing with the momentum system. So this part here is vitally important. It's very small, but it is vitally important to every single play on the game. Here we have our play chart. So our play chart is the main place where we're going to go. So after we find what our plays are, and we see if there's any offensive or defensive effect, actually it's going to be a defensive effect. So either the defense is poor for that group of offense and defensive plays, or it's really good, or somewhere in the middle. Once we have that effect, and we figure in any team level adjustments, we're gonna roll 2d6s. And so here we have a 3. Let's say it's a draw play. Our draw play is here, and we have a 3. And so we look to our draw play, and actually let's think about any adjustments we need to make. Let's say that the teams are totally even. There's no adjustment to be made up or down on the team adjustments. But let's say a draw play to a 4-3 defense. So a draw play, that's going to be a 0. So there's no advantage or disadvantage. We take these two numbers, we add them, and it's a 3. So the result of that play is a tackle for loss, and it's a -3. So you roll a d10 to see what the yardage is, the negative yardage on the play. You can know it's a negative play because it's red. So we have our interceptions, our fumbles, our sacks, and any tackles for loss or just negative yardage over here. So white plays are neutral or incomplete passes. You can see these are runs for 0 yards. This is a catch, but no yards on the screen play. And then the green obviously is going to be positive yards that you can make on the play. So you can see pretty quickly. It might be a little bit more difficult if you're only looking at one team at a time, but if you were to put two teams next to each other, they're not super far apart from each other in terms of how good they are. So that if you lay these two teams next to each other, just kind of by looking at them, you would see that they're very similar. There's more sacks here, fewer sacks here. There's a few different things that are changed between them. You can see that on the 10, you have completions for short and medium passes. On the 9, you have a completion here. So they have a little bit higher completion percentage for Kansas City than Minnesota. And there's little subtle differences that go all through there, but that is in effect, I want to say, what is a 5% difference between the two teams. So it is a little bit of a difference whenever you're looking at completion percentages, and if you looked at some of the numbers, they might be different as well. So you can see here on a 13, they have a completion. On a 13 here, they have an incompletion. So more short passes, more deep passes. So it just kind of works itself out as we massage those numbers a little bit. So that's this. You're going to use this all the time on every single play, whether it's a pass, and you can see our runs and passes listed up here. This little box is called the kicking chart, and you can see it's a D10 roll. We have a column for extra points, kicks, field goal kicks 1 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, and 50 plus. So these are equivalent to what you would find at profootballreference.com. And you can see here green is a make. So if you were to roll a 2 and the kick was 30 to 39 yards, it would be good. If you rolled a 1, it would be a miss. On a 40 to 49 yard kick, if you roll a 1, that's a block, or at least a block attempt. And I'll cover this in a different video, but blocks require a little bit more than just the one roll. Excuse me. And so we have our kicking chart here, and basically you're just cross-referencing. You know, it's a 4 on a 20 to 29 yard kick. That's good. And for me, if and well, we'll cover that more in the kicking game. Here we have a small little chart, but it's got a lot of really good information in it. This game used to be called No Huddle Football. No Huddle is kind of a different quick play game using cards, not dice, but cards. 2 decks of cards. It's a lot of fun. Go check it out. But here we have our passing and rushing ratios. So these are actual numbers from whatever season you're playing. So this is the 2023 Chiefs, just finished the season. 59% of their offensive plays, well, 59% of their passing and rushing plays together were passes. So this doesn't count. This is not counting their penalties, which often that's included as well. So it's not counting penalties, it's just passes and rushes. 59% were passes, 40% were rushes, or I guess 41. Their field goal percentage was 94. Their extra point percentage was 100, which you can see here. And you can see, you know, Butker didn't miss many field goals. Great field goal kicker. And 60 was their longest field goal. Now you'll use these. You can use some of these in the game if you want to. You could create a simplified field goal and extra point system by rolling against it and saying 20 is less than 94, so the field goal is good. Or you can break it out by 10-yard increments this way. This is a little bit left over. I used to have some team attributes over here too, and don't think I'm going to include those anymore because we got a lot of things going on in this game already, and it's a little bit more taxing to think about those. They were things like game-winning drives and third down. How effective are they in third down situations, and time of possession was one. Like, did they take more time off the clock? So those were a little bit more applicable to the old game, but I kept in these just because you might want to reference these throughout the year. There's not a lot of team statistics. This is about what you get here. The last part here is these bottom 2 sections are the player finder for each team. Now I went through and broke them down into rushing, receiving, sacks, interceptions, pass deflections. You can use this chart here for penalties and tackles for loss. So like we had a tackle for loss up here. You could roll and say that tackle for loss was Tranquil, the linebacker. And essentially these are players who got into the game the most. They had the highest snap counts, or the starters basically. And those are going to be the people who were on the field the most. So if you had a penalty and you wanted to assign penalties to players, you could do that using this chart here. And essentially, you'll just roll, let's say you have a rushing play. It's an outside run. It goes for 1 yard. And you wanted to find out who that player was. You roll, an 8 or 9 is Edwards-Helaire. And so you could attribute that one rushing attempt for 1 yard to Edwards-Helaire. So you do that all the way through, and you know the odds are that it's going to be Pacheco because he gets the most rushing attempts, but other players are going to get those as well. So it's no guarantee, but it's weighted toward Pacheco, like 50%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to be toward Pacheco, right? He got 50% of the carries, basically the attempts. And so he's going to wind up with 50% of the yardage. So that's how that works. And same for interceptions and sacks and receiving. And these are the actual players. So that's kind of fun as well to see. If you see something like here we have just QB because the Vikings had several quarterbacks that played throughout the year. It wasn't any one quarterback, but all of those quarterbacks combined sort of fill that spot. So you just give it to a quarterback. But here it's actually Pat Mahomes who got 20% of their rushing attempts in the year. And so that is understanding a little bit more in depth. If you look in the game guide, it also walks through each of these different areas on the team card. The team card is vitally important to the game. You're going to need it. You're going to need, if you're playing head to head, each guy has to, or each player, gamer has to have a team card to be able to play the game. And then if you're playing solo, you'll just need one for each team that's playing the game. All right. That is the team cards.